Um, First of all, I want to point out a striking dichotomy here. The underlying resolution is dealing with school boards, and the amendment itself is expanded to basically any kind of action with regard to schools. So, for instance, the Mesquite Elementary School kidnapping plot of Vail, Arizona, not Tucson, but of Vail, Arizona, had nothing to do with the school board. It had everything to do with three crazies who went into the principal's office and did not kidnap her, but threatened to kidnap her, and were promptly arrested by local law enforcement officials. That's really kind of what you would expect to happen, is that local law enforcement would be involved instead of federal officials. And we do know that, indeed, the National School Board Association did ask specifically for use of certain federal officials to get involved here. That's not make-believe, contrary to what the gentleman from Rhode Island suggests. On page 2 of the September 29th letter, and by the way, this letter being written after there's been collusion with the Biden administration and the NSBA, they specifically asked and said, quote, NSBA specifically solicits the expertise and resources of the U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Secret Service, and its National Threat Assessment Center. That's what they asked for. They didn't ask, they went beyond that. And why did they go beyond it? Because they also wanted the use of the Patriot Act, the next paragraph down. So when the gentleman from Rhode Island says they didn't do that, it's right in the letter. It's right in the letter. They want the federal government to impose and use the Patriot Act against parents who go to school board meetings. And what do we find out later from whistleblowers? Indeed, and this is by the way, has been widely reported, except for by CNN and MSNBC, but it's been widely reported otherwise, that they used threat tags on parents who showed up at school board meetings. And why were the parents showing up at school board meetings? Protesting CRT and COVID-19 restrictions. That's why they were there. Now, what else do we know? We know that on September 29th, that's when the NSBA sent their letter, but that they had been in negotiations with the Biden administration before that ever happened. And I know that we heard AG Merrick Garland saying that, oh yeah, you should be allowed to protest, et cetera. We would never hinder it. Why do we know he said that? Because I was asking them questions to that effect. And he said, no, we don't view that as a terrorist threat. But we also had another attorney general from one of the districts in Washington State testify in one of my committees that they had been briefed. Yeah, they had been briefed on this, and they needed to be alert and aware of this. So the point is, we should be transparent here. This amendment doesn't get at the underlying amendment, and basically, we've already been told that the people who are supporting, that introduced the amendment, are not going to vote for the resolution, even if the amendment gets on. So this is just a red herring, trying to change the very nature of the underlying resolution, which actually would provide us with the information that I think Americans would love to see and hear about, and that is the federal government's police apparatus spying on parents who do protest and have a right to First Amendment activity. Because if there's one thing that I agree with Merrick Garland on, it's that parents have the right to show up at school board meetings and protest and express themselves when they either agree or disagree with school board decisions, policies, and rhetoric. And I just want to close out by saying this. When I heard the chair and then the sponsor of this amendment talk about inflammatory language or inflammatory rhetoric, that's quoting each of them. One said inflammatory language, the other one said inflammatory rhetoric, and that it is extremist or radical to foster and go forward with this resolution. I just find it interesting because I find that there's radical rhetoric coming from the other side, including in those statements in and of themselves. When you start accusing people of radical rhetoric, you ought to look in the mirror. I yield.
The gentleman yields back for what purposes the